Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of a virus. Well, you probably haven't heard of it, but you probably encountered it.
It's one of those sneaky ones.
It is. It's called human metapneumovirus, HMPV for short.
Yeah.
And this little bugger is a major player when it comes to respiratory illnesses, especially for kids and older adults.
Yeah, especially those more vulnerable populations. They tend to have a harder time with it.
Exactly. So get ready, folks, because we're about to unravel the mysteries of HMPV. And you know what's fascinating?
What?
It's this HMPV. It's like a close relative to another respiratory virus that we've all heard of, RSV.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
It's got its own quirks.
It does. It's got its own unique characteristics and its own challenges, I guess we could say.
Yeah, they both belong to the same family of viruses, too, the Paramyxoviridae family. And, thinking about that, maybe that gives us some clues about why they can be so hard to target with things like vaccines and treatments.
Yeah, you're right. It's like they share this playbook of immune evasion tactics.
Right.
Which is a little unsettling to think about.
A little bit.
Especially because, this HMPV virus, it was only discovered fairly recently.
Yeah, 2001.
2001. That's not that long ago.
It's not that long ago in the world of virology. Yeah.
No, it isn't. It kind of makes you wonder, how long was this thing circulating under the radar?
Exactly.
Before we even knew it existed?
Well, scientists over in the Netherlands, they actually stumbled upon HMPV while they were investigating this cluster of, they were unexplained respiratory infections.
Oh, wow.
And it was a pretty big discovery. I mean, it highlighted that there's still so much that we don't know about these viruses out there.
You're telling me.
And, the fact that it's a relatively new discovery, that just adds another layer of complexity when we try to, understand its long-term impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, okay, so let's break this down a little bit. So,
Yeah.
like RSV, you were saying, HMPV spreads through respiratory droplets. You know those tiny particles that come out when someone coughs or sneezes?
Yes, exactly. Just like a cold or the flu.
Yeah. And, of course, it can also linger on surfaces, right? Just waiting to hitch a ride.
Oh, yeah. On doorknobs, toys, you name it.
Anything.
Yeah.
Just waiting to get us.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the public health perspective becomes really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, because it's so good at spreading, this HMPV, it can lead to these widespread outbreaks. And that puts a real strain on healthcare systems.
Absolutely.
Especially during those peak seasons, we see more hospital admissions. And, often it's the pediatric wards, the kids, and the geriatric wards, the older adults that are getting hit the hardest.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, it's like a domino effect.
Right.
It's not just impacting individuals.
Totally.
It's impacting the entire healthcare system. You mentioned peak seasons. Does HMPV have a seasonal pattern like we see with other viruses?
It does. It tends to peak in late winter to early spring.
Ah, okay. So right alongside all the other usual suspects.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's say I wake up and I think I have a cold. How would I know if it's HMPV versus another, run-of-the-mill respiratory bug? Because you mentioned earlier it can be tricky to diagnose.
Yeah, it really can. HMPV is kind of a master of disguise. It often looks like other respiratory infections.
Oh, no.
Yeah, things like the common cold, RSV, or even the flu. So you might see a fever, cough, congestion, maybe shortness of breath, wheezing, all those classic symptoms.
Sounds like a real puzzle for doctors to figure out.
It can be. It can be.
So how do they go about differentiating between all these different viruses?
Well, they've got a few tools. So PCR tests, those are considered the gold standard.
Okay.
They can actually detect the virus's genetic material, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that gives you a definitive diagnosis. There's also immunofluorescence assays. Those look for specific viral proteins. And then there are serological tests, which can detect antibodies that your body produces in response to the infection.
Wow, it's amazing how these tests can work at a molecular level to pinpoint the exact culprit,
It is pretty amazing.
But given that HMPV was discovered relatively recently, I mean, are there any knowledge gaps that are kind of hindering the development of treatments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is definitely yes. One of the biggest challenges with HMPV is that it's really good at partially evading our immune system.
Wow.
It can kind of fly under the radar for a while, which makes it harder for our bodies to mount a really strong, long-lasting immune response. And unfortunately, that has implications for things like developing a vaccine.
Right, because it's not as simple as just creating a vaccine that targets the virus. You have to figure out a way to outsmart its stealth tactics.
Exactly. It's like a constant chess match, between the virus and our immune systems. And researchers are working really hard to develop strategies that give us the upper hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, while we wait for those breakthroughs, what are the current treatment options for someone who's diagnosed with HMPV?
Right now, treatment is mostly supportive. It's about managing the symptoms and making sure the patient's comfortable. So that might include things like oxygen therapy if they're having trouble breathing, making sure they stay hydrated, and using fever reducers to control, the discomfort.
Okay.
In more serious cases, though, hospitalization might be necessary.
Right, so they can get more intensive care.
Exactly.
It's reassuring to know that even though we don't have a specific antiviral treatment just yet, there are things we can do to at least alleviate the symptoms and, support the body as it tries to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really highlights how important preventative measures are, especially since those targeted therapies aren't quite there yet.
Right. So are we talking, back to basics, frequent hand washing, disinfecting surfaces, avoiding close contact with people who are sick?
All those things. Yep. Those might seem simple, but they're really effective in stopping the spread of the virus.
Yeah, and it also reminds us that, we all have a role to play in protecting ourselves and our communities, especially from these new threats that pop up.
I agree completely. And as researchers continue to learn more about HMPV, I'm optimistic that we'll have more, targeted treatments in the future, whether it's a vaccine or an effective antiviral medication.
It's definitely encouraging to know that progress is being made. So to recap, HMPV is a relatively new respiratory virus. It's highly contagious, and it can cause a whole range of symptoms,
That's right.
from mild cold-like symptoms to more serious complications. And although treatment is mainly focused on supporting the body right now, research is ongoing, and there's a lot of hope for the future.
Absolutely. And I think perhaps the most important thing for people to remember is even though we don't have a specific treatment yet, just understanding HMPV better, that helps us take steps to protect ourselves and our families.
That's so true.
Those simple things like good hygiene, being mindful of who we're around, those can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. Knowledge is power. And by understanding HMPV, we can make better decisions to stay healthy and minimize its impact. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We encourage you to keep learning about HMPV and stay curious.
Always stay curious.
Absolutely.